The courtroom was filled with a silence so heavy that even the creak of wooden benches seemed like a thunderclap. Journalists leaned forward with pens ready, cameras clicked at intervals, and the air itself felt suffocated by the weight of the trial. In the center of it all sat Ethan Walker, a man once admired for his intelligence and charisma, now reduced to a fragile figure staring down the possibility of a lifetime behind bars. His name had been splashed across headlines for months, his story dissected endlessly on television panels, yet nothing compared to the atmosphere inside that courtroom. Ethan's story was complicated. Born to a modest family, he was once described as the boy who could achieve anything. Teachers recalled his brilliance, neighbors remembered his kindness, and his mother often said he was destined for greatness. But somewhere between ambition and temptation, Ethan had lost his way. His rise into power, wealth, and influence had been swift, but so was his downfall. By the time investigators closed in, Ethan had been accused of fraud, betrayal, and crimes that shook not only his family but an entire community. The prosecution built its case piece by piece, painting Ethan as a man driven by greed and willing to betray anyone who stood in his path. They presented documents, witnesses, and timelines with precision, their narrative clear and unwavering. Ethan Walker was guilty. The defense, on the other hand, worked tirelessly to humanize him. They spoke of his early struggles, his acts of charity, and how the pressure of success had broken him. For weeks, the courtroom had been a battleground of facts and emotions, but nothing had prepared anyone for what came next. When the judge called the next witness, every head turned toward the back of the courtroom. Gasps filled the air as a frail woman slowly made her way down the aisle. It was Ethan's mother. Her presence alone sent ripples of tension through the crowd. Mothers had testified before in courtrooms across history, but this was different. She was not there to protect her son, at least not in the way the defense had hoped. She took her seat on the witness stand, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the microphone. For a moment, she closed her eyes, as if gathering the strength of an entire lifetime. When she opened them, she avoided Ethan's gaze. The room seemed to shrink, as though everyone was holding their breath, waiting for her first words. "I raised Ethan to know right from wrong," she began, her voice steady but heavy with sorrow. "But somewhere along the way, I lost him." The words hit Ethan harder than any accusation that had come before. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his jaw tightening. For the jury, her words carried more weight than any document or statistic ever could. This was not just evidence, it was heartbreak carved into sentences. She spoke of Ethan's childhood, recalling how he once helped neighbors, how he studied late into the night, how he promised to make her proud. Tears welled in her eyes as she described the boy he used to be. "He was kind," she said softly. "He was gentle. But as he grew, something inside him changed. I saw ambition replace kindness. I saw anger replace patience. And I did nothing. I told myself it was just a phase. But it wasn't." The prosecution listened intently, nodding as her words fortified their case. The defense shifted nervously, objecting at intervals, calling her testimony irrelevant, but the judge overruled. "Let her speak," the judge declared firmly, his gavel striking once against the bench. Then came the revelation that changed everything. She recounted late-night conversations with her son, moments when Ethan confessed his fears of being caught, his desperation to hold on to the empire he had built, and his awareness that he had gone too far. Her voice cracked as she admitted, "I wanted to protect him. I wanted to believe he could still change. But I could not protect him from himself." The courtroom gasped. Some spectators covered their mouths. Others whispered furiously. Even the reporters, hardened by years of covering tragedies, sat frozen, their pens momentarily still. For Ethan, the words were unbearable. His shoulders slumped, his eyes glistened, and for the first time in weeks, he looked truly broken. The mother's testimony continued for over an hour. She spoke not only of Ethan but of the people he had hurt. Families torn apart, trust betrayed, friendships destroyed. Each story weighed heavier than the last. Yet through it all, she never raised her voice, never allowed anger to dominate. Her tone remained sorrowful, as though she was mourning not just her son's mistakes, but the boy she once knew who no longer existed. As she stepped down from the witness stand, Ethan finally looked at her. Their eyes met. In hers was love, but also unbearable disappointment. In his was regret drowning in silence. That glance said everything words could not. The judge called for a recess, but the energy in the room did not break. Whispers carried like waves, reporters rushed to craft their headlines, and the jury sat in stunned reflection. Everyone knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. Not legal jargon, not cold facts, but the raw, unfiltered truth of a mother standing against her own child for the sake of justice. When court resumed, the prosecution used her testimony as the cornerstone of their argument. They claimed even Ethan's own mother could not deny his guilt. The defense tried desperately to spin her words, suggesting they were taken out of context, born of grief rather than truth. But the damage was done. The image of a mother's heartbreak lingered too strongly in the minds of everyone present. Days later, closing arguments began. The prosecution thundered with confidence, their words sharp and precise, pointing again and again to the mother's testimony. The defense fought valiantly, reminding the jury that emotion should not replace evidence, but their voices seemed hollow compared to the echoes of what the courtroom had already heard. When the jury left to deliberate, the world outside waited with bated breath. Crowds gathered on courthouse steps, news anchors speculated on live television, and social media burned with debates. Inside, Ethan sat alone, his eyes distant, as though already knowing the outcome. His mother did not return to the courtroom that day. Perhaps she could not bear to watch the final act of a tragedy she had unwillingly become part of. Hours passed before the jury returned. The judge called the room to order, and silence once again fell like a heavy curtain. As the foreman stood to deliver the verdict, Ethan closed his eyes. No cameras, no reporters, no legal team could protect him from what was about to be spoken. The verdict itself mattered, but for many, the true story had already been told. It was not about guilt or innocence. It was about a mother who chose truth over love, justice over silence, and sacrifice over protection. That single testimony would be remembered long after the details of the case faded. As the gavel struck for the final time, reporters rushed out, headlines already forming in their minds. The trial of Ethan Walker was over, but the story was immortal. It would be told in whispers, in articles, in documentaries yet to come, not because of the crime itself, but because of the mother whose words had turned a courtroom into a place of history.